A decorated royal guard stands at attention before President Trump at Buckingham Palace. The cameras roll, the ceremony begins, and then comes the moment everyone expected, the traditional handshake. But Sergeant Alistair Ward doesn't move. He stands tall, expressionless, unmoving, silent. The president extends his hand, but Alistair refuses. What you're about to discover isn't a story about politics or hatred. It's about a brother's desperate love and a choice that would cost everything. This is the true story behind the day a royal guard's silent protest shook the world. If stories like this move you, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more powerful narratives inspired by real emotions and impossible choices. Behind every moment of defiance lies a lifetime of devotion. Sergeant Alistair Ward had built his entire existence around service to the crown. 12 years in the British Army had shaped him into something unbreakable. 2 tours in Afghanistan earned him the Military Cross for gallantry under fire. His service record read like a textbook example of military excellence, never late, never absent, never questioning orders. But underneath that rigid exterior lived a man whose world revolved around one person, his younger brother, Eli. The Ward brothers shared a cramped 2-bedroom flat in East London, a modest space that somehow felt like home when they were together. Alistair would return from his shifts at the Tower of London still wearing his ceremonial uniform, the bearskin cap pressed warmly against his temples. But the moment Eli's voice called out from the kitchen, something in Alistair's posture would soften. The military mask would slip just enough to reveal the protective older brother who had raised Eli since their parents died in a car accident 15 years earlier. Eli Ward possessed the kind of infectious energy that could light up any room he entered. At 21, he worked as a teaching assistant at a primary school in Hackney, spending his days surrounded by children who adored his patient manner and quick smile. His dream was simple but meaningful: to become a full teacher, to shape young minds the way his brother had shaped his own character through years of quiet sacrifice. Evenings found the brothers cooking dinner together, Eli chattering about his students, while Alistair listened with the focused attention he usually reserved for military briefings. The first signs appeared on a Tuesday evening in March. Eli dropped a plate while setting the table, his hands trembling slightly as he bent to clean up the ceramic pieces. Alistair noticed but said nothing, assuming his brother was simply tired from a long day with demanding children. The trembling returned the following week, more pronounced this time, accompanied by moments when Eli would pause mid-sentence, as if searching for words that had suddenly vanished from his mind. Spring brought a succession of medical appointments that yielded more questions than answers. General practitioners referred them to specialists who ordered blood tests, brain scans, and nerve conduction studies. Eli's symptoms worsened gradually. The tremors spread from his hands to his arms, his balance became unsteady, and his once clear speech began to slur during moments of fatigue. Alistair accompanied his brother to every appointment, taking careful notes and asking the questions Eli was too scared to voice. The brothers maintained their evening routine even as uncertainty clouded their lives. Alistair would return from his duties to find Eli grading papers at their small kitchen table, though now it took him twice as long to write comments in the margins. Their conversations grew more precious as they both sensed something fundamental was shifting. Eli still laughed at Alistair's dry observations about tourists at the tower, but now his laughter came with an edge of desperation, as if he was trying to hold on to every moment of normalcy. Degenerative diseases work like thieves in the night, stealing away pieces of the person you love so gradually that you almost don't notice until too much has already been taken. The medical term for what was happening to Eli would eventually be diagnosed as a rare form of motor neuron disease, a condition that attacks the nerve cells controlling voluntary muscle movement. But in the months before they had a name for their enemy, the brothers watched helplessly as Eli's body began betraying him in small but significant ways. Summer brought the devastating diagnosis in a sterile consultation room at the National Hospital for Neurology. The consultant's words hit them like artillery fire: progressive, incurable, limited treatment options available in the United Kingdom. Eli sat perfectly still as the doctor explained the prognosis, his hands folded in his lap to hide their constant trembling. Alistair asked about experimental treatments, clinical trials, anything that might offer hope beyond the grim timeline they had just been given. The consultant mentioned a research facility in Boston conducting groundbreaking trials with stem cell therapy, the only program in the world showing real promise for Eli's specific condition. But accessing that treatment would require navigating international medical systems, insurance complications, and most critically, obtaining a medical visa for extended treatment in the United States. For the first time since receiving his military decorations, Alistair faced a mission that seemed impossible. One, where failure meant losing the only family he had left. What he couldn't have known was that the very system he had served with such distinction was about to become his greatest obstacle. The research facility in Boston represented everything the Ward brothers had been searching for since that terrible diagnosis. A private Boston lab led by Dr. Sarah Chen had achieved breakthrough results with patients suffering from Eli's specific condition. The experimental stem cell program had successfully slowed disease progression in 70% of participants and reversed symptoms in nearly half of those treated. The facility accepted international patients, but only those who could secure proper medical visas with proof of finances and letters from 4 specialists, demonstrating financial capability for extended treatment. Alistair threw himself into the visa application process with the same precision he brought to military operations. The requirements seemed straightforward enough: medical records documenting Eli's condition, letters from 4 different British physicians supporting the treatment plan, financial guarantees covering 6 months of medical expenses, and proof of intent to return to the United Kingdom after treatment completion. He gathered documentation from specialists, secured a letter of credit from his bank for £30,000, and completed the lengthy DS-160 application form with meticulous attention to every detail. The first embassy appointment arrived 8 weeks after submission. Alistair wore his dress uniform to the interview at the American Embassy in London, hoping his military service might carry weight in the decision process. The consular officer reviewed their documentation with clinical detachment, asking questions about Eli's prognosis and treatment timeline. Eli sat quietly beside his brother, his tremors more pronounced now than they had been during the initial application. The officer promised a decision within 6 weeks and handed them a receipt number for tracking purposes. The 6-week window passed with Eli's condition continuing its relentless progression. His speech grew more labored with each passing day, requiring greater effort to form words that once came naturally. Simple tasks like buttoning his shirt or holding a coffee cup became daily battles against muscles that no longer obeyed his commands. Alistair watched his brother struggle to maintain dignity while his body betrayed him, each small defeat cutting deeper than any combat wound he had ever witnessed. The automated denial arrived through email with no human signature or explanation beyond a form reference to insufficient documentation. Alistair immediately contacted the embassy requesting clarification about which documents required revision or addition. The response came 3 days later. Another form letter directing him to the embassy website for general visa information. No specific guidance, no clear path forward, just bureaucratic indifference wrapped in official language. Appeals required additional medical evaluations and updated financial statements. Alistair arranged for new assessments with specialists at King's College Hospital, each appointment costing hundreds of pounds they could barely afford. The doctors confirmed what both brothers already knew. Eli's condition was deteriorating rapidly and would soon reach a point where experimental treatment would no longer be viable. Time was running out, while forms circulated through faceless government offices thousands of miles away. The cruel irony wasn't lost on Alistair, that his distinguished military service meant nothing in this new battlefield. Medals earned under enemy fire carried no weight with visa officers who had never faced genuine life-or-death decisions. His sacrifice for crown and country bought him no consideration when begging for his brother's life. The same system he had served faithfully for 12 years now treated him like any other supplicant seeking American benevolence. Each rejection followed the same pattern: weeks of silence followed by form letters offering no explanation or guidance for improvement. Medical visa denials often rest on arbitrary interpretations by officers with no medical training, making decisions that determine whether desperate families receive life-saving treatment or watch their loved ones die. The Ward brothers learned this harsh reality through repeated experience as their appeals disappeared into administrative black holes. The final denial arrived on a Thursday morning in September. Alistair opened the email while Eli slept in the next room, his brothers breathing shallow and labored even in rest. The message contained the same cold language as previous rejections: application denied, no appeal process available, case closed, no explanation for why a decorated soldier couldn't secure medical treatment for his dying brother, no acknowledgement of the human cost behind their bureaucratic decision. Eli accepted the news with quiet resignation that broke Alistair's heart more completely than any display of anger could have. His brother had already begun preparing for the inevitable, organizing his teaching materials and writing letters to colleagues who would need to take over his classes. Alistair burned with helpless rage that had nowhere to direct itself except inward. 3 days later, the notification arrived for ceremonial duties at Buckingham Palace during President Trump's state visit. The honor that should have been the highlight of his career now felt like a cruel joke. What goes through a man's mind when he knows he's about to sacrifice everything he's worked for in a single moment of defiance? The ceremonial duty assignment arrived through official channels, and Alistair read his orders 3 days after the final visa denial arrived via form letter with no explanation. Sergeant Alistair Ward's name appeared on the roster for President Trump's state visit to Buckingham Palace, selected from hundreds of qualified guardsmen based on his exemplary service record and unwavering dedication to protocol. Under normal circumstances, this assignment would represent the pinnacle of his military career. Standing at attention during a state visit meant joining the ranks of guardsmen who had served monarchs and presidents for centuries. The honor carried weight that extended far beyond the ceremony itself. Alistair read the assignment orders while sitting beside Eli's bed, watching his brother sleep fitfully through another night of increasing discomfort. The bitter contrast struck him immediately. He had been chosen to represent British military excellence before the very administration that had denied his brother's desperate plea for life-saving treatment. The official notification detailed his specific duties during the welcoming ceremony, including the traditional greeting protocols that would place him directly in President Trump's path during the formal inspection of guards. Training for the ceremony began immediately at Wellington Barracks. Alistair joined 23 other selected guardsmen for rehearsals that covered every detail of the presidential visit. They practiced the precise timing of salutes and the diplomatic handshake protocols that symbolized respect between nations and goodwill between military services. Breaking such protocol would constitute a deliberate breach of etiquette, with consequences extending far beyond military discipline. Each evening after training, Alistair returned home to find Eli's condition slightly worse than the morning before. His brother's speech required greater effort now, words coming slowly and sometimes slurring together despite his best attempts at clarity. Simple movements like reaching for a water glass or turning pages in a book had become deliberate actions requiring concentration and planning. Eli never complained about his deteriorating state, but Alistair could see the frustration in his eyes when his body refused to cooperate with his mind's instructions. The sleepless nights began during the second week of ceremony preparation. Alistair would lie awake staring at the ceiling, while Eli's labored breathing filled the silence between them. His mind cycled through the same questions repeatedly. What message would his silence send? What consequences would follow? Whether one moment of defiance could somehow honor his brother's struggle against an indifferent system. The weight of nearly 2 decades of military service pressed against his chest like armor that no longer fit properly. Conversations with Eli during these final days carried an undercurrent of unspoken understanding. His brother spoke about his teaching career in past tense now, making peace with the reality that he would never return to his classroom. Eli organized his personal belongings with methodical care, writing letters to colleagues and preparing instructions for whoever would take over his responsibilities. He never asked Alistair about the upcoming ceremony, perhaps sensing that his brother carried burdens beyond normal ceremonial duties. The psychological toll of choosing between personal loyalty and professional duty created cracks in Alistair's usually unshakable composure. Military training had prepared him for combat situations where life and death decisions required split-second judgment, but this choice demanded months of careful consideration. His actions would define not only his remaining years, but also how history would remember both Ward brothers. Protocol officers conducted final rehearsals 3 days before the ceremony, walking each guardsman through their specific responsibilities during the presidential inspection. Alistair practiced the traditional greeting sequence dozens of times. The precise salute, the respectful stance, the firm handshake that acknowledged diplomatic protocol. Each rehearsal reinforced the muscle memory that would normally ensure flawless execution, but now felt like preparation for betrayal of everything he had sworn to uphold. The morning of the ceremony arrived with October rain drumming against the windows of their East London flat. Alistair dressed slowly in his ceremonial uniform while Eli slept in the next room, each piece of regalia carrying the weight of tradition and the promise of what he was about to destroy. The red tunic, the bearskin cap, the polished buttons that reflected years of dedicated service, all would soon become symbols of his final act of defiance rather than monuments to military excellence. Standing before the mirror in their small hallway, Alistair made his final decision with the clarity that comes only when all other options have been exhausted. In a few hours, cameras would roll, and the world would watch as ceremony unfolded with perfect precision. The morning sun cast long shadows across the forecourt of Buckingham Palace as television crews positioned their cameras for optimal coverage of President Trump's state visit. Red carpets stretched across ancient stones, while security personnel conducted final sweeps of the ceremonial route. Protocol officers moved through the assembled crowds with clipboards and earpieces, ensuring every detail matched the precisely choreographed schedule that had been months in planning. The royal guards stood in perfect formation along the palace entrance, their red tunics brilliant against the gray stone facade, bearskin caps adding imposing height to men already selected for their commanding presence. 24 guardsmen had been chosen for this historic moment, each representing years of dedicated service and unwavering commitment to crown and country. Sergeant Alistair Ward stood forth from the left in the inspection line, his polished boots reflecting the camera lights that would soon broadcast this ceremony to audiences across the globe. His breathing remained steady despite the weight of what he planned to do, years of military training keeping his exterior calm, while his mind raced through the consequences of his intended actions. The other guards maintained their traditional stillness, unaware that one among them carried a burden far heavier than ceremonial duty. President Trump emerged from his limousine precisely on schedule, his confident bearing matching the diplomatic pageantry unfolding before him. American and British officials flanked the presidential party as they moved toward the palace entrance, where the inspection of guards would begin. Cameras clicked and whirred as photographers captured every angle of the ceremony. The president appeared relaxed and accustomed to such ceremonial moments from years of similar state functions around the world. The inspection began at the far end of the line with practiced efficiency that had defined such ceremonies for generations. President Trump moved methodically from guard to guard, each encounter following identical protocol. A brief pause, eye contact, the extension of his hand, and a firm handshake accompanied by a few words of appreciation for service. The first 3 guardsmen executed their roles flawlessly, their responses crisp and professional as they had rehearsed countless times during preparation. President Trump approached Alistair's position in the line while cameras swiveled to capture this routine moment of diplomatic courtesy. Photographers adjusted their lenses for the perfect shot of presidential goodwill toward British military excellence. Protocol officers watched from the sidelines with practiced eyes, ready to intervene if any detail strayed from the established script. The crowd of dignitaries and media representatives pressed closer, anticipating nothing more than another predictable handshake in a day full of ceremonial gestures. President Trump stopped directly in front of Alistair and extended his right hand with the same confident motion he had used 23 times before. His eyes met those of the decorated sergeant with the expectation of routine courtesy and professional respect. The cameras captured the moment with mechanical precision, their operators expecting nothing more than another diplomatic formality. But Alistair's hands remained firmly at his sides, his gaze fixed straight ahead in perfect military bearing. Two flashes from a photographer's camera illuminated the stillness that stretched between them. The president's hand hung in the air while seconds passed without the expected response. Confusion flickered across President Trump's features as he realized this guardsman would not be following the expected protocol. His extended hand wavered slightly while his mind processed this unprecedented breach of diplomatic etiquette. Camera operators instinctively zoomed in as they sensed something unusual was occurring, their professional instincts recognizing a moment that would require closer examination. Protocol officers shifted nervously at the periphery of the scene, their carefully planned ceremony suddenly veering into uncharted territory. Alistair's stillness became a form of communication more powerful than any words he could have spoken. His refusal to move transformed the space around him into a statement of defiance that resonated through the assembled crowd like ripples across still water. Every second he remained motionless added weight to his silent protest, turning a routine diplomatic gesture into a moment of historical significance. President Trump finally lowered his hand and moved to the next guardsman in line, the ceremony continuing as if nothing extraordinary had occurred. Officials worked to maintain composure while mentally calculating the implications of what they had just witnessed. Alistair stood perfectly still as the presidential party completed their inspection and moved toward the palace entrance. The cameras had captured everything, and now the real consequences would begin. Within days of the footage spreading across every major news network in the world, the disciplinary hearing convened at regimental headquarters. Colonel Matthews sat behind a mahogany desk, while Alistair stood at attention in his dress uniform, the same red tunic that had carried him through years of distinguished service, now marking him as a soldier facing the end of his career. The charges included breach of protocol and conduct unbecoming an officer, failure to follow direct orders during a ceremonial function. Each accusation carried weight that would normally destroy any hope of continuing military service. The hearing lasted 3 hours as superior officers dissected every second of Alistair's actions during the presidential visit. They reviewed video footage frame by frame, analyzing his posture and facial expressions for signs of premeditation or political motivation. Alistair answered their questions with the same precision he had brought to every aspect of military life, never offering explanations beyond the basic facts of what had occurred. When Colonel Matthews asked directly why he had refused to shake the president's hand, Alistair simply stated that personal circumstances had influenced his decision to break protocol. Global media coverage transformed Alistair from an anonymous guardsman into a symbol that different groups claimed for their own purposes. News outlets dissected his background, revealing his military decorations and his brother's medical struggles without his permission or consent. Social media platforms exploded with opinions about his actions, some calling him a hero who had stood up to power, others condemning him as a disgrace to the uniform he wore. Television pundits debated the meaning of his protest, while newspaper editorials argued about the appropriate limits of personal expression within military service. The verdict arrived with bureaucratic efficiency that matched everything else about Alistair's final days in uniform. Dismissal from service, forfeiture of pension benefits, and a permanent mark on his military record that would follow him into civilian life. Colonel Matthews delivered the sentence with visible regret, acknowledging Alistair's previous exemplary service while explaining that military discipline required consequences for actions that broke fundamental protocols. The ceremony that had once promised to represent the pinnacle of his career had instead become the instrument of its destruction. Eli learned about his brother's sacrifice through news coverage that reached their East London flat before Alistair returned from his final day at Wellington Barracks. His deteriorating condition made speech difficult, but the tears streaming down his face conveyed emotions that words could never capture. When Alistair finally came home carrying his personal belongings in a cardboard box, Eli managed to whisper the only words that mattered between them, that he understood why his brother had chosen love over duty when everything else had failed. The deeper meaning of Alistair's choice emerged slowly as letters arrived from strangers who had faced similar battles against uncaring bureaucracies. Families dealing with visa denials, medical emergencies, and administrative indifference wrote to thank him for making their invisible struggles visible through his moment of public defiance. His refusal to shake hands had become a statement about human dignity that resonated far beyond the specific circumstances of his brother's illness. Public reaction remained sharply divided for months after the ceremony, reflecting the complex nature of protest within military structures. Veterans organizations debated whether Alistair's actions constituted legitimate expression or unacceptable breach of duty. Some praised his courage, while others questioned whether personal circumstances justified breaking solemn oaths to crown and country. The arguments revealed deeper tensions about the relationship between individual conscience and institutional loyalty. Both brothers underwent profound transformation during the weeks following Alistair's dismissal from service. Eli found unexpected peace in knowing that his struggle had been witnessed and validated by his brother's sacrifice, even as his physical condition continued deteriorating. Alistair discovered strength in vulnerability as he learned to define himself beyond military identity and uniform. Their conversations grew more meaningful as they both accepted that some victories cannot be measured in traditional terms of success or failure. The lasting impact of Alistair's silent protest created something more powerful than any military decoration he had ever received. His moment of defiance had transcended politics to become a testament to the enduring strength of human relationships in the face of systemic indifference. What had begun as one man's desperate attempt to save his brother had evolved into something that spoke to the fundamental choices every person faces when forced to choose between conformity and conscience. Months later, the Ward brothers found themselves living in a transformed world where their private struggle had become public testimony. Alistair Ward's journey represents something far greater than a career destroyed or protocol broken. His return from that moment at Buckingham Palace brought him the most valuable prize any hero can claim: the knowledge that he chose love over conformity when it mattered most. The elixir he carried back from his ordeal wasn't external victory, but internal transformation, understanding that some battles are won through stillness rather than action. His motionless stance spoke louder than any speech could have delivered, proving that true strength sometimes means standing still when the world expects you to move. Every person watching this story faces similar crossroads where they must choose between what's expected and what's right. How far would you go for someone you love? If this story moved you, consider subscribing to explore more human interest narratives.